Call to order the meeting of the Caribou Planning Board, Wednesday, November 5. First item, I know we have some presentations tonight. On our agenda, we have public input, which is not for the presentations that are on the agenda. Is there any public input from anybody? Seeing none. Minutes of the September 3 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
Okay, we have motions and a second. All those in favor? New business. Mr. Marquis, grant application for recreational trails project.
Chairman Sear, Planning Board, my name is Gary Marquis with the Superintendent of Parks and Rec at Caribou. We are currently writing a grant for a trails grant to repair our section of trail off of York Street, out behind Armco Ave, down off of Linden, across Caribou Stream, over to Route 89, where our existing rail trail is off the B&A. This trail has been in existence since '08. It's due for some upgrades. We want to include bicyclers, horseback. We want to make it better trail for walking as well, and also ATVs. The grant that we are going after is a recreational trails project grant, and it's a $100,000 grant. So what I'm looking for from the planning board is an approval of us being able to continue writing this grant.
Any questions from any members of the planning board?
This is kind of a continuation of what Kathy had asked.
Correct. Correct.
The comp plan, when we were
Yep.
working on the comp plan,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity to go after this grant this year. Basically we write it the year prior, and then hopefully we get awarded it in April, is how this grant works. We do have the matching funds for it, in-kind matching funds. We have had some estimates on the trail to what we want to do. We would like to install a permanent bridge across Caribou Stream. Right now, we have a removable wharf that we take out in the fall, put back in the spring. It's problematic. Every time the water rises, it changes a little bit. So part of the plan is, if we are awarded this project, we are going to have to separate some of the project out. We know we can't do it all, but more priority is probably building a permanent structure across Caribou Stream. And the last couple years, part of the bridge stays in place on the edge of the bank of the brook. It hasn't moved at all. So that's been our test of if the ice is going to move it around, and it hasn't even touched it. And last winter, or this past spring, was the toughest spring so far to date, and the bridge never moved an inch. So
How much traffic does that trail system?
this trail, a lot of traffic. It connects Caribou. It makes a circular trip around Caribou. Plus, it connects to our existing walking trail, our Collins Pond walking path that we want to upgrade as well. The circle trail, which is called the Legacy Trail, and the Crosstown Connector, it's a 11.5-mile loop.
Gary, does any of that proposed trail cover or cross any private property?
Yes, it does. And we have all landowner applications. Everybody's on board with us doing, upgrading the system. As landowners know, if you can upgrade a system, they'll typically will allow us to stay on their property. It's when they're rampant all over the place with no signage, that's when we have issues. So the landowners are on board. We've had some with Porvair. We know that they're building on, and they're working with us if they're letting us stay on their property as much as they're building on. So they see the value of the trail system. Big Cheese Pizza is absolutely, they love the trail sitting right next to their business. They're a huge supporter of it. So it's been a well-used trail since '08.
Thank you.
Yep.
And after we approve this, you take it to the city council for approval?
Well, I might be doing this backwards. I'm new at this. I've already gotten the approval from the city council.
Okay.
So my bad on that.
That
Yep.
already happened, yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, that's not a problem. Any other questions?
Well, maybe we should give them a hard time.
Just make me stand here a little bit longer, that's hard enough time.
I have one. It's-
There you go. Now you know.
My question
Yes, Mr.
is,
White.
is related to this trail in some way. On Fort Street, just this side of the Fort Street Bridge, there's that access ramp that was built and is now closed. Is that ever going to get taken out?
Well, we asked again this year to have the rail line put our crossing back in. They did, and we have some issues with some private landowners that don't want the ramp put back in. So it has not been used at all this season. And that ramp, it's a double-edged sword. For us, the more important trail is our crosstown trail. The ramp only supports one trail, and that was basically to get across the bridge to get onto the CP side. That's all that ramp was ever built for, was to get the traffic from CP, from the Presque Isle side. The landowners don't want the ramp back in. They'll live with the trail going by their house, but they don't want the ramp, and so we haven't opened the ramp.
That's the ramp on the
That's a ramp off Patton Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's about 4 years, isn't it?
It was only open for one season, yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
It's a shame.
it is.
So how do people get across the river? Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
Bridge.
They use the bridge.
They can't use the ramp to get to the
No,
bridge.
but they use the bridge.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Hopefully they know where they're going.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to approve the grant application.
I make the motion that we approve the grant application.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Next project, the outdoor pool.
Yeah, the outdoor pool, as we all know, was closed this season due to some issues with the pool. We closed it due to the fact that we are losing a significant amount of water year after year. We've been trying to patch it over the years. We just can't find the leak. The last big patch job that was done on the pool was in 1993. Basically, it was an asphalt overlay. We brought in a contractor this year to look at it, to give us a price on fixing the pool with a rubber liner, which was about I think it was $170,000. We also had another contractor come in and give us a price on another overlay of asphalt, which was around the $75,000 mark. We understand that there's a lot of people that want to have the pool back. The issue with the pool is it's only open for 30 days. The last couple of years, the water is significantly cold because we're putting in 1,500 gallons of water a day in it. So constantly watering it, filling it to keep it up. We've had an opportunity to write a grant to repair the pool. It's a lock-on grant. It's federal money. It's a 50-50 match up to $200,000. So the grant amount is for $100,000. And we are looking at building a splash park. It's something a little bit different. It's what a lot of the communities are going towards. No, we're not going to, I'll answer the question right now because I know the question's going to come up. That will not allow us to have swimming lessons. This does not hold water. It just very little bit amount of water. It has fountains and spray units, buckets of water that it will dump on top of the kids. Lot less O&M. We can keep it open longer. We don't necessarily need to have lifeguards on working, which are more costly than a regular pool house staff per se. There's a lot of these splash parks, they're not even manned. They have a 15-minute timer button. You walk over, hit the button, and go and play, and it shuts off in 15 minutes. You go back over and turn it back on. So we've kind of changed our gearing, and we're attempting to go after this grant for the splash park. A lot less money than actually the pool. and we would have a splash park basically the size of what we have now for an envelope. So we are currently writing this grant, and this grant needs to be postmarked by Friday. And we didn't have a lot of time to go after this grant, and this was a very, very tough grant to write. So I'm asking the planning board if they would allow us to continue writing this application.
Where would the splash park be located?
Well, right now, it would be located at the existing pool. Everything that I've gotten designed so far is in that same envelope.
How easy is it to tie that in with Teague Park? Because the school and the parking lot are in between the two. Right?
Well, the parking lot, the pool is above the pool, is above the school.
Right,
But the parking lot is on the other side. The parking lot is our parking lot, it's the pool parking lot.
yeah, but what I'm thinking is that the splash park might be much more attractive if it was down in Teague Park.
In Teague Park, if we would have to move it, Mr. White, I believe I would probably put it where, in our overflow parking lot of the rec center. The only reason why is when that building was built, they had the foresight to put the pumps in possibility of building phase 2 of that building. So I would probably put it in the overflow parking lot of our wellness center. Teague Park's got restrictions. That has deed restrictions given by Teague family.
I'm all for splash parks. I've seen my grandkids play in them down in Boston, and I think they're fantastic.
When you when you go through the grant process, you write the grant, you submit it, and you prevail. That doesn't obligate the town to do anything.
No, it does not, Mr. Hunter.
Okay.
No, it does not. And we are very fortunate right now. We do have money in our pool reserves, and we have been given a donation from a private, not a private foundation. It was somebody that was going out and asking for donations, and they're going to donate $75,000 to this project. But they want it to go towards a splash park. So $75,000 plus our money in our pool reserves will be the in-kind match.
Another question to go back to the regular pool.
Yes, sir.
If you either put the rubber bladder or the concrete on it, the temperature should be dropping, so would that be indicative of the pool staying open longer?
With a splash park, it would allow us to stay open. We could stay open longer.
But the pool itself?
The pool itself, we have gone towards, we've changed it, we turned the page over and we are going after a splash park,
Okay,
not
so
the pool.
They're not looking to do the pool.
Yeah. The pool, if we were to do the pool, completely rebuild it with a full filter system, the estimate that we've gotten was $635,000. That's with a full filter system. Currently, the pool does not have a full filter system.
Okay.
That wouldn't change the amount of days that the pool would stay open regardless anyway. We'd still be on average about 30 days.
Correct. But with the splash park, I believe we could open a little earlier, and we could stay open longer because we don't necessarily need lifeguards on hand.
It's true.
Yep.
So how much would it cost to maintain the splash park?
That, Mr. Freem, I don't have those figures just yet. I'm working on them. What I've seen so far, it is cheaper to operate a splash park than it is a full boat pool. The turnover rate on a pool that size of ours, which is 475,000 gallons, the turnover rate is a lot. And in the course of 16 hours, you have to turn your water over. You need a significant filtration system and significant pumps. This way here, the splash park, would allow us to have a smaller pump system, smaller filtration system, and the current estimates that we've gotten so far to date is $265,000 to build a splash park.
You said that the pumps and the filters have already been installed.
Well, they're not installed in the wellness center, but they're all deadheaded pipes dedicated for that that phase 2, which phase 2 might, we don't know, not sure, but that's where we would like to put it. If we had to move out of Teague Park, I would like to put it on our same footprint of our wellness center.
Was there much discussion about location? As far as putting it where the old outdoor pool was versus alongside the,
No, the reason why we're going after this grant was the gentleman that runs this program was up doing a site inspection of our existing sites, and we were just happened to be talking about pool, and he says, there's money in the lock-on grants for that, up to $200,000 if you want to repair your pool. That was July 14th. And we were already writing this RTP grant for the trails, so we threw on another grant on our plate, and it's been a quick process, a real quick process. So we're hoping that we're successful. If we're not, we'll find other avenues. We're currently writing a grant through a bank right now as well. Mr. Blease is currently writing this grant. Matter of fact, I think he's actually done writing it, and he's asking for $10,000 on that grant application. And this would help go towards the pool project or the splash park project.
has this splash park also been already approved by the city council? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So we're just the last link.
Yes.
Any more questions? May I have a motion to approve?
I will move that we approve.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Seer. Thank you, Planning Board.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to open a public hearing for discussion of site design application.
I'll brief the board, and then we'll give the applicants a chance to speak, as well as any members of the public. The applicants purchased the property. Shortly after purchasing it, they realized it had not been correctly approved for a two multifamily home. There's a 3-bedroom apartment and a separate 1-bedroom apartment in the home. My research has found that that change was made probably 15 or more years ago. Therefore, the applicants are just seeking planning board approval to correct a past wrong. Normally, we would do this through a consent agreement for anything related just to a building permit, but whereas it's something that, had it been done at the time, would have required planning board approval, we prefer to take it through the planning board rather than address it with a consent agreement.
And so the applicant is purchasing this property. It's already a 2-dwelling property.
Applicant already owns the property.
He already has purchased it, okay. And,
But it has been an apartment on it for over 20 years.
Oh, it's been quite, my understanding is sometime in the 90s it was.
would having taken a single-family home and added a mother-in-law apartment necessitated coming to the planning board in the first place?
Yes, because if you're adding a second kitchen, you're converting it into a multifamily home. And there's 2 very distinct units in the property.
Okay. Okay. And so the buyer is simply wanting to make sure the paperwork is the way it's supposed to be.
Correct.
Are you the buyer?
That's about it right there, yeah.
Okay.
No, we purchased the place, and like he said, we found out that the paperwork downtown didn't match what we had.
Yep.
So we just wanted to make sure that we're on the up and up and legal. We didn't want you guys coming back to us later and telling us that we're way wrong.
Yep.
You know? So basically what we're asking is that you make what we bought legal.
Okay.
You know, they are 2 separate distinct units, like he said. They have separate entrances. They have separate kitchens. They have separate 100-amp panels. You know, they are pretty well separated. And they have, you know, separate controls for heat. I mean, it is all like a utilities paid apartment, and, you know, it's one furnace, but they have their separate
Yep.
control of everything.
So,
You know. Like he
And,
said, we're not asking to change anything that's there or anything. We just want to, like you said earlier, you know, cross our Ts and dot our Is.
And this is a public hearing, and I don't see any other members of the public here. Are you with him?
Yeah, this is my wife.
Oh, okay. And so I don't see any opposition present. Do any members of the planning board have any questions?
I do. Is it gonna be used as a multifamily versus it's gonna be almost like a mother-in-law apartment, or is it gonna be used as?
No,
two
I
separate
actually had already rented one of the
So it's two
apartments
separate
out,
rentals?
and my wife and I live in the other apartment,
Okay.
is how it's been situated, and that's how we come to find out that we needed to talk to you gentlemen.
So, having said that, is everything up to meeting code with regards to life safety?
I believe so.
and/or-
I know when I bought it, the insurance company came through and, they approved everything that was in there, and the few things they didn't, they had me do, like I put a new metal roof on the house and shingled the garage when they told me to, and,
Smoke detectors?
There's wired-in smoke detectors that are hooked between the two apartments, and with the combination, carbon monoxide and stuff, and
As a courtesy, when we approve new housing units, the fire chief will usually do a walkthrough. So once the planning board approves, if that's the direction they go, I'd have the chief go and take a look for life safety.
And if there is an issue,
we'll fix it. It's that
It'll be
simple.
addressed just any other life safety issue that we find in a residential home.
okay.
And then with regards to the zoning, it's set up as a C2?
Correct, which allows multifamily housing.
Okay, but he's asking, I just wanted to make sure, because it's two-family and the multifamily, I think, are different definitions, aren't they?
Both, I believe, are allowed in the C2 zone. The two-family is. I say multifamily, I should say two-family.
Okay, no other members of the public, so we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion. I believe that the assistant city manager was, because we have not yet modified our application form, was sharing with me that the site design review criteria really would not need to be addressed for approving this property, so would entertain a motion to accept waiving the site design requirements.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Do we want to do it contingent upon it being inspected either by code enforcement and the chief? And then going through it again and making any changes with regards to any issues that may arise?
You could approve it conditionally on the fire chief giving his okay. That's fairly common in a lot of approvals.
Well, that's kind of good, gets back to the question I had, that if and when the fire chief reviews this, if he finds problems, then the issue is dealt with between the fire chief and the,
Correct. And they'd have both the opportunity and the requirement to correct it, just as any other property. The approval is that the use is approved. If we went in and there weren't smoke detectors or something like that, that would be addressed just like it would with any other building.
so is a motion contingent on that really beneficial, or just a motion to
I think
approve?
it strengthens the need for the life safety code to be met. It would likely happen either way, but it's not a bad contingent to add to most approvals.
I would agree to that amendment.
Especially, in hindsight of what happened down in Portland over this past weekend, where I know that particular structure at once was like a two-family home and then converted into apartments.
Okay, so your motion is amended, Bob,
Yeah, I agree to that.
and you made the second. Obviously, you approved the amendment. Okay, so we're making the motion waiving the site design requirements, conditional upon approval from the fire chief and the life safety code. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous? Thank you.
Okay, now can I just ask, does that mean that I'm all right, and I just gotta make sure that I pass when the fire marshal comes?
Correct. If you contact the code office, we'll arrange a time for Chief Susi and I to come by, and then we'll be good to go from there.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. You've
You're
taken a
welcome.
very great weight off my shoulders. I've learned some valuable lessons doing this process, and we'll spend more time talking to the town the next time we decide to purchase property before we sign.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Item D on the agenda, update on nuisance ordinance. Has our legal counsel returned anything yet?
He has not. Still waiting to hear back. I just want to update the board that we did send it over a month ago. They usually take time. They go through an ordinance. They look for cases where similar ordinances have been upheld or not upheld, and then they try to draft how they'd be able to defend it legally once it's in place. So we have not heard back yet, but I would presume, as soon as we do hear back, if it's favorable, which I think it will be, we'll go ahead and schedule a public hearing on that ordinance as soon as we can. We're just waiting for them to get back to us. I can send them a message this week to see if I can give them a bit of a kick in the butt, but it's usually a lengthy process on their part as well.
Okay. Update on Mobile Home Park Committee.
Similar situation with the Mobile Home Park Committee. There hasn't been a meeting in the last few months. The committee has come up with some draft language for changes to the city's mobile home ordinance and changes to how we internally administer the mobile home ordinance and deal with the mobile home parks. The first round of changes is, again, going before legal review right now. Once we get a yes or no that we're good to proceed, what we'll do is craft that into a more formal ordinance. The group will, along with a report for recommendations and changes, not only to that ordinance, but citywide as they relate to mobile home issues. I'd like to see that completed by the end of the year, but as we get into the holidays, I know that things get a little bit hectic. So progress has been slow the last few months, but they've actually put quite a bit of work into it, and I think we're going to see a good product at the end.
Okay. Next item, comprehensive plan update.
The board has in front of them updated comprehensive plans. Most of the work that was put in by the board in suggestions for updates and edits and changes has been incorporated. We've taken care of some of the pagination and other issues. I've had a couple other individuals go through and read it, so we're trying to make sure it's in good shape grammar-wise and spelling to make sure it's a professional document. The planning board has a meeting scheduled for the 24th of November, which is a Monday at 5:30, for the formal approval of the comprehensive plan. And we selected a Monday because the planning board needs to approve the plan and the city council needs to approve the plan as well. We're going to try to have both of those meetings in one night. The reason we threw it in the 24th is once the plan was finished internally, we do need to give 30 days notice. You've probably seen some notices in the paper. We've had it posted publicly and available in the city clerk's office, on the website, and at the library, which we're all required to do by state statute. So we picked the 24th as the closest day out to try to get both the planning board and the city council to be able to approve the final plan pending their public hearings. That way in December we can submit it to the state, hoping that they'll go through their 30-day review process throughout December, and right around the beginning of the year we'll be ready to go.
Will that, of necessity, be a lengthy meeting?
I don't think so. We've advertised the meetings heavily. It depends on how many folks want to show up and offer a comment or input on the comprehensive plan. It may be a very brief meeting, but you never can tell.
So you're looking for a November 24, 5:30 PM meeting.
On a Monday. And I can tell you, I wouldn't have scheduled it on the same night as a council meeting unless I was confident it was going to be a very quick turnaround. You never do know.
And the purpose, the single agenda item for this would be a public hearing.
Just to hold a public hearing on the comprehensive plan.
Comprehensive plan.
And then for the board to vote on whether or not to approve and adopt the comprehensive plan as presented. That would be the only agenda item. Anything else that comes up, we won't schedule.
Does the city council, whose meeting would immediately follow ours, also have a public hearing?
Correct. And it's just required by state law that the comprehensive planning committee, which is the planning board in Caribou, and that the local governing body both hold public hearings and adopt it, similar to an ordinance adoption.
And so if there is public comment at the public hearing, we just...
It depends on how substantial it is. I mean, if you had a lot of people in the room that were upset about one element or one goal or whatnot, you make a decision, do we change it on the fly, or is it something that we need to go back to the drawing board and work on and bring it back for, again, you really play it by ear.
You mentioned that following our approval and that of the city council, you then move it to the state of Maine, and hopefully they approve it and it's adopted January 1, 2015. Are there any penalties or any issues if we're late?
I don't think so. Some community development block grants, as we mentioned before, are very contingent on your comprehensive plan, whereas we're this far into the process, I don't think a shift one way or the other is going to cause anything substantial. And again, if somebody comes up with a goal suggestion to add on that night, if the planning board wants to add it in and then make that amendment to the council, it's just like if an ordinance comes before the planning board for review. If it's substantial, it's going to need to go back to the drawing board. If it's something that's just ancillary or just in addition to, the planning board could make that change and then go forward.
So we've got 3 or 4 weeks to read 120 pages.
You got less than 3.
3 weeks? Okay. Well,
You got 19 days.
You can do it.
it's doable.
No, my only concern is I know that I will have another commitment that night that I really don't want to miss. Starts at 6:30 in Presque Isle, so,
I would presume you'll be, yeah.
Well, you can leave at 6.
yeah, I can leave at 6.
At 6.
Yeah,
And who knows, it may be over by 6.
yeah, we'll cross our fingers.
If it's not, if it's not over by 6, then it's gonna go for a long time. So at 6 o'clock, if it's still going,
I'm hiking.
you can hike, and I think we'll either be done by that point, or we'll know we'll be in for a long
I'll
haul.
be honest with you, I don't mind saying this, it would be our final band rehearsal before the public concert, which is the following Monday, which everybody is invited to,
What's the band?
the Presque Isle Community Band.
Oh,
Or the
oh,
UMPI
okay.
Community Band, excuse me.
Okay. I was gonna say we could keep you till 6:15 and then have Tony drive you.
No, Ginny has to go too. Thank you for your indulgence on that.
Okay, so do you need a motion to approve the November 24 meeting?
It wouldn't hurt, even though it's been scheduled.
It's been a lot lately.
I was gonna say, everything happens before it comes to us.
We can go on leave.
I make a motion that we
Meet.
meet the 24th of November
Second.
to finalize contract.
Excuse me.
All those in favor? Okay.
You say no one of these times, and that'll stop happening. Again, it was just a function of we needed to get the notice out there because it's a 30-day notice requirement by state law.
Item G, discussion of new zoning and land use regulations.
Yes, if you reach back into your memory sometime a year and a half ago or so, we talked about how once we would finish the comprehensive plan, changing our zoning is usually a required part of that, and we've come up with some new zone descriptions in there that we would want to change on the map, as well as a couple changes that have come before the board that you've said you'd rather wait until we were done to make several changes at once as opposed to just piecemealing it. I'd like to know how you want to approach that, and we're almost at the point where we had talked quite a while ago about, once the comprehensive plan was finished, looking at our land use regulations, which is chapter 13, and seeing if we can do sort of a top-down review of our land use regulations, try to clean them up, modernize them a bit, try to make them a little more business-friendly, and maintain the quality that we want. I'd be interested in hearing any input the board has on how you want to approach that, or what you're looking for, or how you'd like to go about it.
What are your recommendations?
What I can try to do is have a new zoning map made up based on the zones in the comprehensive plan. It has to be adopted before we could formally do that. I can work with NMDC to get the map made, and we can look at that as one part of the project. This is what the new zoning map for the city would look like, and it really is trying to just condense the residential and commercial and industrial districts and meet out some of the changes in them to make it a little bit easier for somebody to read, and hopefully easier to build. That there's a downtown district, and you know when you see a downtown district, there's a type of building and a type of development you're going to see in a downtown area, and then there's a commercial district. We currently have that, but calling it a C1 and a C2 to the naked eye makes it a little bit more confusing. The R1 and R2 residential districts, the only difference is whether or not multifamily homes are allowed, and to be honest with you, they're allowed in quite a few different areas. Changing that to planning board approval for two-family or multifamily allows us to have a single residential zone with the same setbacks and the same lot lines, and they're very similar as it is. The R3 zone, which becomes the rural zone, is very different. And I know we talked about targeting changes in the rural zone to try to coerce development more in the urban core of the city rather than spreading out the infrastructure. So I just think that when you're trying to come up with some form-based codes to look from a developer or a builder, it's a little bit simpler, a little bit easier to follow is what we're trying to go for, and try to be a little bit more builder and planning friendly, as opposed to, I mean, Presque Isle has, I think, 9 or 10 different zones. If we can shave that down a little bit and be a little bit more flexible, that will be my goal with the zoning.
One of my questions, my understanding is spot zoning is frowned upon.
Correct.
And when you mention about the downtown and commercial zones, I know that one of the things that has been discussed is that Caribou lacks in senior citizen housing, specifically assisted living facility. And my understanding of the ideal location of assisted living facility is something located in between a grocery store, a pharmacy, and a bank. Because that's where the senior citizens have, that's the business that they like to do, and typically they like to do it on foot, so they don't have to own and maintain a car. Could somebody build a 20 apartment unit senior housing on High Street, between Key Bank and Shop and Save?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but that's something that we can look at as part of it. It's not just about changing the colors on the maps, it's about putting what's allowed in those zones. And what we're seeing in a lot of rural communities is that they're trying to be more age-friendly, and they're trying to place development where it is more senior-friendly, and to say, look, we may not want any other apartment complex coming into this part of town because maybe it doesn't quite fit, but you know what, the need for senior housing or elderly or sistered housing is there, and we're going to allow that in a downtown zone, for instance, because the need is there for the community and it works for both parties, whereas non-assisted living you could almost put anywhere in the urban core and you would see it. The downtown district, the C1, is fairly small. It's really just Sweden Street and the surrounding streets. High Street is actually zone C2, but you know what, you could put into the C2 zone that a density level of assisted housing over X units is allowed. And that, if you look at our table of allowed uses, that would be part of changing the zoning. The land use would come separately, but it would be what's allowed in each of these zones and what do we want to allow with code enforcement approval and planning board approval. And maybe we say, X units for a senior development or assisted living is allowed in any zone. The I-2 might be a little bit challenging, but that's all part of relooking at the zoning and what do we want to allow, where we want to put it. There's always a fear that when you change your zoning, people are going to go and build whatever they want, wherever they want. I don't think that's going to happen. If we allowed casinos in any zone in Caribou, I don't think all of a sudden we're going to see 9 casinos go up. So I'm not terribly concerned about that. We could move our zoning to a point where we really just want to regulate what you're building and how you build it, and less so where. Because you're right, if a 20 or 30 unit assisted living facility goes here versus there, are we going to say no to the growth and it's not really going to kick us in the butt down the road?
Are you going to put the casino close to the bank?
Put the casino next to the assisted living. I'm actually going to build it right on. You see the one in Bangor, instead of the parking garage, that'll be the assisted living. And
Just link it to Hannaford's.
exactly. One-stop senior retirement community.
Well, I've seen several assisted living facilities that are located a long way from everything, but what they do also provide is scheduled or by appointment transportation for people who have errands to run.
The one in Limestone is away from pretty much everything.
Yeah.
The one in, you get into, there are varying levels of assisted living.
I know.
And, what I'm referring to is where you have people who, maybe assisted living isn't the right phrase, maybe independent housing would be something, senior restricted, because the one in Limestone is a licensed, assisted living, i.e. boarding home facility. And so I'm thinking of something that would be more independent housing.
Is Leisure Gardens more in line with what you're talking about?
Yes.
Or at the initial level?
Yeah, Leisure Gardens in Presque Isle
That's an assisted living.
is an unlicensed, it is not a licensed assisted living facility.
Really?
It's an independent housing complex with health services, limited health services on site.
But not common food? It's not a dining room?
Yes, there is a dining room. There's, it's one of a kind,
Yeah.
which there should be more of. Anyway.
In something along those lines, it's really about the size and scope of the project, and is it not consistent with the comprehensive plan, which it would be, or is it not in our interest to allow one to go really wherever it suits them best? I mean, you got to have a unit restriction on something like that. You wouldn't want to say, well, if it's 2 or more units, because then you're going to start to see some unique situations. But if somebody's going to build 10 or 20 or 30 units, if they're going to purchase the land and build it, it's really going to fit where it works for them and it's going to work for the city as well. I don't want it far on one of the rural parts of town, because again, we're talking about spreading the infrastructure and sending the PD and fire further out there, but maybe that works for them. The more we can focus on density, the better it is. But do we want to be very restrictive and say it's only in this zone or it's only in this zone, or do we say, you know what, if you're going to build a project, it's of a certain size, what works for you works for the city?
So what you're saying is, even though you might zone an area commercial, you could change your definition of commercial.
Well, we allow multifamily housing in commercial now, and you wouldn't want residential and commercial. Not that it's that big of a deal, but two-family, multifamily is acceptable, or 10-unit plus apartment complexes, or whatever it happens to be. That it's residential, but it's a commercial function as well.
So getting back to...
So that's how I'd want to approach the zoning part of it. The land use regulations, Chapter 13 in your city code, those are the majority of our land use regulations. If you remember the building codes, we can't quite do anything about. That's a state law. We are working with MMA to try to present some legislation this year to maybe see if we could have some different means of enforcing that. But Chapter 13, we're going to want to look through and see what we want to change. How can we be more business friendly, open to development and open to growth, but maintain a certain level of quality in the community as well? It might be worth having me print out a copy of Chapter 13 for everyone and just going through it and highlighting what you think could change, what we want to see change, what can we take out and be okay that we're still going to have some quality. I know we've talked about changing the site design application. That's certainly something we're going to do. But we reduced the scope of the sign ordinance in Caribou about 1.5 years ago. I think that's worked. It's been easier for us, and we haven't seen any problems with it. If you've actually looked in the last couple of years, we've seen more signs getting built in Caribou, and that's a good thing. And they're quality signs, and people are investing in signs. They got to make sure they get their sign permits, but it's become an easier process. And there may be other ways we can do that. I don't think we should be afraid of loosening restrictions a little bit and focusing more on, look, we want quality, but we're not going to try to dictate every single element of how a business is going to operate and how they're going to run. And
when the city went for the business-friendly designation from Augusta, was the zoning and everything that you're just discussing, Chapter 13, et cetera, did that come into the approval process to get the business-friendly designation, or was it just that, you know, how long it takes from the time somebody applies to the time it's granted, or what was?
It was more the permitting process and the applying and approval process. We're not Cumberland County. We're not coastal Maine. And some of our zoning ordinances are what you would see in high growth or fast growth areas. So I think we need to really take a look at it, whether or not that works for us and how we're growing and how we're developing. New England tends to be pretty strict with zoning in general. Texas has little to no zoning in some very large cities, and you don't see a crapshoot. It's not like it's a mess like people would think it would be, but I think it's a very New England trait that we want to very much control what the houses look like and what neighborhoods look like. And maybe in Portland that's important to them, and here in Caribou we just are growing and developing differently, and our business model and our business profile is a little bit different.
It would seem if we've got like this really comprehensive zoning structure that we're not going to strictly enforce because it's not good for us, we ought to just kind of less, I'm thinking.
Long term, I think my own opinion is you're going to take your land use regulation and your code enforcement, and you've got to tailor it to how you're growing and where you're growing, just like a business. If we were growing by leaps and bounds, we're going to want to crack down. We're going to be a lot more strict, and we're going to have to be a little bit more careful. We're not seeing the growth, so we need to sort of engineer that growth, and then we can come in and say, okay, we're seeing some growth. Maybe we want to take a look at doing things a little bit differently, but we're not seeing much growth, and what growth is there, we're making it difficult to do. Most zoning is designed to restrict growth and to slow growth. We're not seeing much growth. That's really the only purpose of zoning. People will give you many highfalutin reasons as to why you have zoning, but it's really there to slow and to restrict growth. And you need to have something there, but I think if you look at our ordinance, which is dated, it's designed for a community that is not Caribou, may have never been Caribou, and doesn't match the world today or the world we want to see down the road in town.
So isn't what Matt just mentioned have merit? That
I agree completely. A little bit flatter, a little bit looser. I mean,
You know, less zoning is, I mean, if,
less is more, less is better.
yeah, if the goal of zoning is to restrict growth, then let's diminish our zoning as much as we can.
I agree, and we can focus more if you look at a lot of ordinances, there's a lot of quality control, if you will, in there for different business types and different functions. I would rather move more of that to the property maintenance code, where we're making sure, in the life safety code, where we're making sure that there's quality of the property to how it looks and how it interacts with the community, but we don't need to tell them that you're only allowed one sign on your property, and it has to be in the front, and it has to be 4 feet back from the road. I would rather say, if it's your business, it's your home, keep it in good shape, keep it consistent with the community, and go from there. I mean, I don't think a giant smog factory is going to go in at Cary Hospital if we, if we cut back on our zoning and land use. I could be wrong, but I don't see that happening. I'm not afraid of growth.
So identify and then provide the flexibility that you need to design the zones or be a little bit more flexible instead of being, this is all it's here.
Exactly.
Well, but part of what I think I'm hearing, when you're saying identify, then create the flexibility, if you have a rigid ordinance structure or zoning structure, you could have a developer who goes online, reads our zoning, et cetera, and decides from what he sees, well, I can't do business in that town, I'm off to somewhere else. Rather than change after you've identified possible growth, my thing would be to change before to entice growth.
And then provide, put your change out there, but have the flexibility in there so that person who reads it can see that there's room for me to do what I want to do there, instead of having just C1 and this is all you're allowed. So have multiple definitions for your zone.
Yeah.
I'd rather 4 zones with 20 uses than 10 zones with 8 uses, or however the math would work out. I agree. It's just, there's a way you can be flexible and you can ensure quality and ensure that we're still growing and developing in a sensible way. If in 10 years or 5 years we get 15 subdivision applications and we're building 100 homes a year, well, all right, maybe we're going to look at our lot sizes and our frontage requirements and be a little bit more strict. That's not happening, nor is that going to happen overnight. So I think we can take a step back and say, we want to grow, we want to build, let's make that happen.
When you read through the zoning ordinance as a whole, and some of the things seem kind of arbitrary, because it really wasn't made for Caribou. It might make sense in the event somebody's looking on the internet to have some process that's obvious when you look at the zoning ordinance where you can apply, and maybe this is exactly what spot zoning is, but apply for an exception if I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example, but
They call it a variance.
a variance, yeah, and the way it's set up, sounds like it'd be really time-consuming and difficult to achieve.
Do we have a
The-
zoning board of appeals in this town?
Technically, we do.
Okay.
They haven't had a meet yet, or at least in the last 3 to 4 years. The ordinance changed where it went from appointed individuals in town to certified code enforcement officers in Aroostook County would be our zoning board of appeals. The state regulates what a variance, according to your ZBA, can be. There's a 4 test, I think it's called a 4-point hardship test that has to be met. The way we could, I wouldn't say get around that, but get around that is if you have a use that may not completely line up with the zoning, because our comprehensive plan is designed for us to grow, you just have a planning board approval for that. So that way there's a step in the process where if you're going to build a restaurant in a commercial zone, well, the code enforcement officer just signs off on it, it's good. Well, you want to build a 2-family, just have the planning board approve it, and that way there's a chance for them to come in to make their case, and it's getting an extra level of review, and the public have a chance to comment as well, to say, look, we're going to allow this, but we're going to have it go through an approval
Yeah,
process.
like take out some of the no's and put in some PBs instead.
Yes.
Exactly.
A way to do it without having to demonstrate hardship. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
maybe it's not a hardship, it's just have this great opportunity that I can't take advantage of.
And it's something we didn't think of before.
Right. I've tried to start doing that over the last 6 months with non-conforming structures. There's an interesting line in there about whether you can approve a complete reconstruction of a non-conforming structure, and it's supposed to be only in the event of a fire or total loss, and there's a line in there that literally says, or other reason, and it doesn't quite get defined. So I've been defining that rather liberally. If a home or a barn or shed is what we see the most, or a garage, is technically non-conforming, but it's been in use for the last year or two, and it's just aged out, and replacing 25% of it isn't going to make sense, and repairing it at that point isn't going to make sense, well, why shouldn't they be allowed to just knock it down and rebuild, even though it's non-conforming? Because otherwise we're just letting a building rot, we're losing value on it, the homeowner or the prop business owner is losing value on it, and isn't our goal to grow and to build? We don't allow new nonconformities, but I've actually had 2 garages that are getting built because I've told them, go ahead, if it's on the same footprint, tear it down and build a brand new one. I'd rather have a new, safer, energy efficient structure in growth and building in town rather than say, well, nope, your garage is going to sit there and continue to rot until it completely goes away because, it was built 20 years before our zoning went in and it's, 6 feet back from the road instead of 8 feet. If it's there and you want to replace it with something new, go ahead and build, grow, invest is what we want to do. And the end result for the town is it's already there. I'd rather a new structure on the same footprint than the one that's there continue to just rot away.
Sounds good to me.
Yep. So the review of Chapter 13 would appear on a future agenda?
At some point, it would probably take a few meetings to get through. What I can do is I can print up a separate copy of the ordinance for everyone for Chapter 13, so you can go through and redline and highlight and make questions, and that way it'll be separate from your regular ordinance. And at a future meeting, maybe that's the starting. I'll get those out to everyone before the next meeting, but maybe that's where we start, and we just start having the discussion on what we want to see and what we think we can do. And I can try to put together, because I had started working on it earlier in the year, something for the zoning, and the definitions would be as they're in the comp plan, and sort of what that map would look like and what the yeses and nos would look like. I started developing that because the comp plan mentions 2 special development zones where I think it's the only things, there's a lot of different things that are approved, but it's planning board approval only, and that's for the riverfront and the bird's eye site along Route 1, because we may want one of a variety type of high value and high density development to go into those areas. We don't want to say just a high value residential or just a casino or just a big shopping center. Any one of those and their different uses would be okay, so that's why it would require planning board approval, because we're calling it sort of a special development zone, because we want it to be targeted for high density. We don't want somebody to just stick another dollar store on a lot that's otherwise going to have a bigger value to the community down the road.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Any other questions or discussion of any motion to adjourn?
Second. Or you didn't move. I'll move.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned, 6:23.